All right, let's take you to this now. President Cyril Ramaphosa has sent his condolences to the family of the late Mosiuoa Lekota, who died this morning at the age of 77. Ramaphosa says he harbours deep respect for Lekota. We're now joined via video link by ANC NEC member and a long-time comrade of the late Mosiuoa Lekota, Lindiwe Sisulu. Ma'am, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time on the program. So as we get your reaction, of course, to the passing of Mosiuoa Lekota, please also reflect on his journey. I mean, from his years as a young SASO activist to a freedom fighter to political leader. What stands out most, about his contribution to the political fabric of South Africa for you? A very good afternoon. Ma'am Lindiwe Sisulu, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. I can hear you.
Would you like me to repeat that question?
No, yes, please. I missed it.
So as we get your reaction, of course, to the passing of Mosiuoa Lekota, who died, in the early hours of this morning at the age of 77, perhaps also reflect, of his journey from his young years as an activist to a freedom fighter, of course, and a political leader.
Okay. I met Mosiuoa Lekota at about the time that the movement around Black consciousness was gaining ground, and they were recruiting quite vociferously around there. And I met him at a meeting at a hall nearby my home called Uncle Tom's Hall. And I saw in him a very determined man to make sure that we get to a place where South Africa will be free, very dedicated, very committed. And I went to exile after that. And when I came back, he was a very mature man. I think he was at that point living in the Free State. And he became the Minister of Defense. That's when I interacted with him most closely. I was Minister of Intelligence at that particular time. Terra was 100% given to his responsibility towards the ANC. He loved the organization. He's a very passionate man in everything that he does, that he's committed to. And I really enjoyed the banter I had with him, because when he was, he did put on some kind of anger from time to time, but you could see from the corners of his mouth that he was actually about to smile. He had a very playful kind of way of dealing with especially adversarial matters, but a very committed cadre, imprisoned at a very young age. By the time he came back, he had made up his mind that he's going to make sure that the country is liberated. 100% committed cadre. And he was effervescent, he wasn't just, he was very given. He was very out there about his commitment to the ANC. Even when he had left to go and join COPE, you could see that his heart was left behind in the ANC, and he often made jokes around that. I think we've lost an incredible man who, from his student days right through to the last day, was very committed to the struggle, very committed to making sure that all of us are free, very committed to make sure that that which we dreamt of as young people does come into effect, and that the country would reflect that we actually gave everything that we had. Yeah. He had a very frowny face, even when he is very about to laugh. And he actually liked to play around with his face and his features just so as to confuse the other people. But deep down, he was a softy, very committed man. Gave his youth to the organization, went to jail for the organization, and represented us in Parliament with distinction. I took after him, I think, when I was Minister of Defense, and found a very sober defense force that he had left behind. He's a giant of our period, and whether we like it or not.
Yeah, and just on those reflections, I mean, some of which are quite personal indeed, and thank you for that. I mean, when you consider, the history of the country's democracy is fully written, where do you believe Mosiuoa Lekota's name belongs in that narrative, particularly what you've just been describing? When you also consider the fact that, I mean, he was 34 years old when he was released from Robben Island, and we've seen him, as you've said, assuming a number of key and significant roles, defense, the position in defense as a cabinet minister. We've also seen him, of course, as the first premier of, in the Free State, dating back, of course, to his portfolio from UDF as a founding member. You've also mentioned significantly, of course, the co-founding of COPE. Where would we place him in those history books?
Sorry, where would we place him?
Absolutely. The narrative of Mosiuoa Lekota when you consider, South Africa's full democracy being written.
He was one of the most forward-looking youngsters from a very early age. He took his incarceration in Robben Island very well. He came out and he was full of jokes about it. I've never seen him really angry. He did put on a very angry face, but as soon as he spoke, you knew that he had actually was on a lighter note. A very dedicated man, Terra was. I think he spent 10 years in prison from a very early age, from his Black consciousness days to the time when we came back, he had been in prison. But I didn't see in him any malice towards the government or towards the people who had imprisoned him. And at the corners of his mouth was a ready smile, almost like waiting for a reaction and knowing that he's actually joking. He was he was passionate about his space in the organization, very passionate also about the liberation struggle. I've not seen a more passionate politician. He was the absolute passionate everything in the organization.
Yeah, I must say.
He was chairperson.
Yeah, I must say we remember that passion. Sorry, Ms. Lindiwe Sisulu. It was, you are reflecting quite, profoundly of that passion. We do remember it very, very, significantly. But very quickly, before we leave, have you had any time or chance to speak to his family members, following hearing of the news of his passing?
No, because I don't know what I'm going to say to them. I'd like to go and be there, because in our culture, when somebody has died, there's always a prayer session the same evening. And I'm hoping that after the session, I'll be finding my way back there. And I don't know where it is, because his home is in the Free State, I believe. But I do think that there is a place where he calls home in Johannesburg somewhere. That's where I will be going to, because I have a great deal of admiration for him, and his anger is something that he was always able to maintain, and he's a revolutionary at heart, and nothing can take that away from him.
Absolutely, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time and for speaking to us. Of course, that is ANC NEC member and longtime comrade of Mosiuoa Lekota, Lindiwe Sisulu.